Imagine waking up to find bright orange violation notices plastered across your front door, every single morning for weeks. At first, I thought it was a mistake. But then the fines started piling up, and the anonymous letters slid under my door got darker and personal. Someone in this neighborhood wanted me gone, and they were willing to bend every HOA rule to do it. What they didn't know was that I was about to turn their own system against them. Who was behind the harassment, and how far would they go when I fought back? I moved into Maple Crest Estates on a warm spring morning, the kind where the air smells faintly of lilacs and fresh paint. After years of cramped apartments and noisy neighbors, the quiet cul-de-sac felt like a dream finally earned. The houses all looked polished, but not in a cookie-cutter way. Each had a personality, from bright shutters to hand-built porch swings. My small, cedar-trimmed home sat at the end of the lane, where evening sunlight pooled across the driveway like honey. I spent my first few weeks planting roses and meeting the occasional dog walker who waved politely before disappearing behind identical mailboxes. It was peaceful, eerily so. Still, there were hints that harmony came with strings attached. A thick HOA welcome packet sat on my kitchen counter, its pages stuffed with rules about paint colors, trash can placement, even the acceptable length of grass. At first I laughed it off. After all, how bad could a neighborhood association be? But small things began to catch my eye. A clipboard-carrying woman lingered outside longer than a casual stroll required. A neighbor's son quietly repainted his mailbox after someone left a note about aesthetic standards. I noticed glances when I left my car parked at the curb for more than a night. It all seemed minor, until the day I received my first letter, sealed with the HOA's official crest, politely informing me that certain elements of my property required immediate attention. I hadn't realized it yet, but that envelope marked the end of my quiet life on Maple Crest and the start of a battle I never asked for. The letter that landed in my mailbox looked harmless, just a crisp white envelope with the HOA crest, but inside was a 3-page list of required corrections. According to them, my rose bushes were encroaching beyond the acceptable perimeter, and the trim on my porch did not conform to the approved shade of off-white. I had lived there barely 2 months. At first, I tried to laugh it off. Maybe they sent these notices to everyone. I trimmed the roses and repainted the trim, even matched the swatch from their guidebook. 2 days later, another notice arrived. Fine, $75 for leaving my trash bins at the curb beyond the allotted hour. The pickup crew had been late, not me. I paid anyway, thinking it would end there. It didn't. By the next week, the violations came faster than I could read them. $50 charge for improper mailbox, angle. A warning about my driveway, reflecting excess light after rain. An accusation that my lawn was half an inch too long. Each envelope felt like a punch to the ribs. I started hearing whispers when I walked my dog. Neighbors who'd once waved now offered tight smiles and quick turns. Someone was feeding the board every move I made. I decided to attend the next HOA meeting. Maybe I could clear things up face to face. The clubhouse smelled of burnt coffee and cheap carpet cleaner. 5 board members sat at a long table, all wearing matching navy polos with the HOA logo. At the center sat the woman I'd seen lingering outside my house, Margaret Pierce, the board president. Her eyes sharpened when I introduced myself. I'd like to understand these violations, I began, holding the stack of letters. Margaret barely glanced up. All residents are expected to comply with the covenant. Non-compliance results in fines, as outlined in the handbook you received. But some of these are absurd. I tried to show her the notice about rain on my driveway. She cut me off with a thin smile. Rules are rules. If you have further concerns, submit them in writing. The room went silent. A few neighbors shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke. I left that meeting with a knot in my stomach and a fresh notice waiting at home. $150 fine for disruptive behavior at official proceedings. From that night on, the harassment turned personal. One morning, I found my garden hose sliced clean through. Another evening, a neighbor whispered that a petition to review my residency was circulating. When I checked the community bulletin board, my name was scrawled on a flyer about preserving neighborhood standards. I installed cameras around my property. The first week, the footage caught shadowy figures, faces hidden by hoods, loitering near my car after midnight. One clip showed someone sprinkling a white powder along my fence line. The next day, my roses wilted black. I called the police. They shrugged, citing lack of evidence. Could be animals, could be kids, the officer said. But I knew better. Determined to fight back, I dug into the HOA's own paperwork. Buried in the bylaws was a clause about annual audits of the board's finances. Public records showed that the last audit was 8 years overdue. I also discovered that Margaret's husband owned the landscaping company the HOA recommended, the same one getting lucrative maintenance contracts. I brought these findings to the next board meeting. Camera rolling on my phone. Before I could finish reading the clause, Margaret slammed her gavel. "This meeting is adjourned," she barked, storming out as the other members followed like startled geese. The next morning, I woke to find a bright orange notice taped across my front door. Final warning. Immediate compliance required or property seizure proceedings will commence. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. They were threatening to take my home. Friends urged me to lawyer up. I did, and that's when the real rot surfaced. My attorney uncovered forged inspection reports, fake maintenance invoices, and a trail of funds routed through shell accounts connected to Margaret's landscaping business. It was a scandal waiting to explode. But before we could act, the pressure intensified. My tires were slashed. Anonymous calls rang at 2 a.m. with nothing but silence on the other end. Someone even left a dead crow on my porch, wings splayed like a warning. I remember standing there, the morning sun bleeding across the driveway, staring at that lifeless bird. Fear twisted into something sharper, resolve. If Margaret and her cronies wanted a fight, they were about to get one, and just when I thought I'd gathered enough proof to shut them down, an unexpected letter arrived, one that threatened to unravel everything I'd worked for and force me to make an impossible choice. The morning of the HOA's emergency hearing, the sky hung low and gray, as if the whole neighborhood sensed a storm brewing. I dressed not for battle, but for calm authority. Navy blazer, no tie, and a folder thick with evidence. My lawyer, Angela, met me at the clubhouse doors with a single nod. Inside, every chair was filled. Neighbors lined the walls, whispering like a restless tide. Word of the board's misdeeds had leaked, though no one knew the full extent yet. At the long table sat Margaret Pierce, her lips a thin, determined slash. She tapped the gavel sharply. This hearing will address the homeowner's multiple violations and the board's recommendation for property seizure. The words echoed like a gunshot. Angela rose first. Before you proceed, we have exhibits to introduce, she said, sliding a flash drive across the table. Evidence of financial misconduct, forged inspections, and breaches of your own charter. Margaret's eyes narrowed. Irrelevant. This hearing is about Mr. She sneered my name, and his failure to comply with community standards. Angela didn't flinch. Actually, it's about whether this board has the authority to enforce anything at all. We've filed an injunction and a formal complaint with the state attorney general. But today, for the benefit of the homeowners here, we'd like to show what we found. The projector flickered to life. First came scanned invoices, triple-billed landscaping fees, maintenance charges for work never done. Next, bank statements tracing HOA funds to a company owned by Margaret's husband. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Margaret tried to speak, but Angela overrode her. And here, she clicked to another slide, forged inspection reports. Margaret's signature on each, used to justify fines and property seizures. The room erupted. Neighbors who'd stayed silent for years now shouted questions. You did this to my driveway repair. Is this why our fees keep rising? Chairs scraped as people surged closer, phones raised to record. Margaret slammed her gavel, face flushed. This is an ambush! These are lies, fabrications, I stood. My voice cut through the chaos. Lies? Then explain this. I held up a final document, the HOA's own bylaws, highlighting the section mandating annual audits, 8 years overdue. You broke your own rules long before you accused me of breaking yours. A murmur of agreement swept the room. Someone shouted, We want to vote! Margaret's jaw worked furiously. "There will be no vote," she barked. Angela smiled coolly. "Actually, your charter allows a recall with a simple majority of present homeowners. Shall we?" The neighbors didn't wait for permission. Hands shot up like sparks. A count began, 10, 20, 30, more, until the numbers dwarfed the board members still seated in stunned silence. When the final tally was read, Margaret's reign ended in less than 5 minutes. But she wasn't finished. Her face hardened to stone. "You think this changes anything?" she hissed. "We can fight this in court for years. You'll drown in legal fees before you ever touch me." I met her gaze. "Then I guess we'll see you in court. Because every homeowner here just witnessed your corruption." Angela added, "And the Attorney General will too." "We've already filed." For the first time, Margaret faltered. Her eyes darted to the neighbors, former allies now glaring like a jury ready to convict. Someone recorded every twitch of her face. She opened her mouth, closed it, then turned on her heel and stormed out, the door slamming so hard the windows rattled. A stunned silence lingered, then the room erupted in cheers and relieved laughter. Strangers clapped my back. Someone started chanting, "New board! New board!" The clubhouse, once a place of quiet intimidation, pulsed with something new, freedom. But as the celebration swelled, a different emotion churned in me. Relief, yes, but also the heavy realization of what it had taken to get here. Sleepless nights, fear for my safety, the constant hum of anxiety every time I opened my mailbox. Outside, dusk painted the street in molten gold. I walked home to find a final insult taped to my door. A last violation notice, hands scrawled in furious red ink. "You'll regret this," it read. No signature, but I didn't need one. I felt a flicker of unease. Margaret was out of power, but not out of spite. And as I peeled the paper from the door, a single thought lingered. The battle might be over, but the war for peace in this neighborhood was just beginning. The night after the recall vote, the neighborhood was quieter than I'd ever heard it. No footsteps prowling past my windows, no murmured gossip slipping through the hedges, just a heavy, unfamiliar silence. I sat on my porch, a mug of cooling tea in my hands, and felt the tension of months slowly loosen its grip on my shoulders. But the story didn't end with Margaret's dramatic exit. In many ways, it was just beginning. Within a week, a temporary committee of homeowners formed to keep the association running. For the first time, meetings buzzed with real conversation instead of scripted pronouncements. People who'd once avoided eye contact were now comparing notes, uncovering how deep the rot had gone, double-charged maintenance fees, bogus emergency repairs, and a slush fund siphoned into Margaret's husband's landscaping business. When the Attorney General's office responded to our complaint, the mood shifted from cautious optimism to outright vindication. Investigators requested records, interviewed residents, and eventually filed a formal inquiry into misappropriation of funds and fraud. Margaret and 2 board members received subpoenas within a month. It was surreal watching news vans roll down our tidy cul-de-sac. Cameras capturing the once-feared HOA president ducking into her house behind drawn blinds. Neighbors who'd whispered behind curtains now openly shared their stories with reporters, each revelation stacking like bricks in a wall of accountability. Meanwhile, the practical changes were immediate. The new interim board voted to suspend all outstanding fines, including the thousands Margaret had levied against me. The orange violation notices stopped. The neighborhood seemed to breathe again. Children chalked the sidewalks without parents worrying about defacement, and porch lights glowed warm and unpunished. I spent my first free weekend replanting the rose bushes Margaret's allies had poisoned. Their new buds, small and stubborn, felt symbolic. Even the air seemed lighter, the oppressive watchfulness replaced by a cautious camaraderie. Neighbors I'd barely spoken to began waving again, some stopping to apologize for staying silent during the worst of it. I didn't hold it against them. Fear is a powerful silencer. The legal process ground on for months, but the updates were worth every waiting day. The investigation revealed over $200,000 in misused HOA funds. Margaret faced charges for fraud and forgery. Two board members accepted plea deals for their roles in falsifying inspection reports. I'll never forget the morning the news broke. My phone buzzed with messages from neighbors. "They're pressing charges!" Justice, finally. It wasn't joy I felt exactly, more a deep, steady sense of balance being restored. Margaret's fall wasn't just punishment. It was proof that even the most controlling bully could be held accountable when enough people refused to stay quiet. Yet victory brought its own strange quiet. For months, I'd woken each day braced for a fight, checking cameras, documenting every notice, scanning faces for malice. When the threat evaporated, I had to learn how to live without that constant hum of vigilance. I found myself lingering on my porch longer at night, listening to the steady chorus of crickets. I started weekend hikes again, something I'd given up when I feared leaving the house unattended. Little by little, life's simple pleasures returned. Still, some scars remain. A single knock on the door can send a quick spike of adrenaline. I keep the security cameras, not out of paranoia, but as quiet reminders of what unchecked power can do and how prepared I'll be if it ever tries again. The community didn't just heal. It evolved. The new board, elected in a transparent vote, rewrote the bylaws to limit the board's power and require annual audits. Meetings became potlucks, complete with kids chasing each other between folding chairs. What began as a battle for my own home turned into a collective awakening. One evening, months later, I stood at the edge of the cul-de-sac, watching neighbors set up tables for a block party, the first in over a decade. The laughter and music felt like a declaration. This was our neighborhood now, not the private fiefdom of a single power-hungry president. Looking back, the lesson is bigger than one crooked HOA. Margaret's reign thrived because we all believed at first that silence was easier. It wasn't until we compared notes, pooled evidence, and spoke with one voice that the tide turned. Power, I learned, only grows in the shadows of our hesitation. Shine a light. Share your story. Document everything. Refuse to be intimidated. And even the most entrenched bully can crumble. Sometimes I still see Margaret's house when I drive by the county courthouse. Her once pristine lawn now overgrown, the shutters faded. I don't feel triumph. What I feel is something steadier, stronger. The quiet certainty that ordinary people, united, can defend their homes and their dignity. As the roses outside my porch bloom brighter than ever, I often wonder how many others are living under the weight of similar petty tyrannies, silent, unsure, waiting for someone to speak first. Maybe that someone can be you, because if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: a single voice might be ignored, but a chorus can bring down even the most unshakable walls of power.